full length of the cycle, in other words, the cycle's wavelength, and you plot those two lines onto your chart. Then what happens is, where those lines intersect, you generate projections, okay? And those projections give you price projections for where you expect the market for that particular cycle to go. It was a huge part of Hurst's Profit Magic of stock transaction timing book, and in the cycles course he doesn't mention it. And I stand to be corrected. Perhaps he mentions it, but to my knowledge, in the cycles course, and I am fairly familiar with that work, he didn't really mention half span and full span moving averages and using their intersections to generate projections. In course, he developed the FLD, the Future Line of Demarcation tool, which was a new tool and which is in many ways the same thing. So the FLD is an extension of the half span moving average, but that was the subject of the webinar of Traders Chat 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago. So let me speak about the half span moving average and the full span moving average. Many people, having read the Profit Magic of Stock Transaction Timing, see their future in gold because of this powerful tool, the half span moving average and the full span moving average. And they say, where is the half span moving average and the full span moving average in Sentient Trader? And most of them don't realize that it is in Sentient Trader, but it's called the triad. Let me show you the triad. Here is the triad. Welcome to the triad, everybody. And there you can see it. Why is it called the triad? Because there are, in fact, 3 lines. There is a Hurst enthusiast who has published an e-book in which he presented an idea which suggested using not only the half span and full span moving average, but using 3 lines. And this is an extension of that idea. It's not that idea. It's sort of inspired by that idea, if you like. And we use 3 lines. These 3 lines are not half span and full span. They are what are they? They are full third, 1/2, and 2/3 span moving averages. And where those moving averages intersect, one generates projections. So let me zoom in. In the past, where these lines have intersected, Sentient Trader plots a triangle. I hope that you can see these triangles here. My whiteboard has stopped working, but let me see. No, there we go. It's come back up again. I hope you can see these 3 triangles over here. Okay, those triangles are where the half span, 2/3 span, and 1/3 span moving averages displaced into the past intersect. You can see the triangles there. If I draw over them, you won't see them. Let me draw an arrow to highlight them. There's one of them. There is the other one of them. Sentient Trader uses the cluster point, the central point of this intersection, to generate a projection. The projection it generates is from the previous trough, which is over here, and very much like an FLD projection. And the way Hurst proposed in the Profit Magic of Stock Transaction Time, you generate up to the center of that intersection, and then you generate an equal distance and an equal angle, and you end up with the target over there. Now, these projections are very accurate. All right, they are fantastically accurate. I'm sure you're looking at that and you're saying, that's it, I'm going to be rich the rest of my life. Well, you might be. Not, sadly, because of triad intersections. Triad intersections are fantastically accurate when you're looking at them in the past. When you're looking at them in the past, they're fantastically accurate. But I have mentioned before, here is an 18-month, here is the 18-month triad plotted. Let me do the same thing and show you the projection. The 18-month triad generated. Here is the cluster of intersections. You can see those 3 triangles there, I hope. Here is the trough. There is the line, and there's the projection forward, and there's the projection somewhere around there. I'm not very good at drawing projections live. So there's the projection. Very good projection, I'm sure you will agree. However, there is a fundamental problem that has to do with using displaced moving averages, and that is, as I explained before, displaced moving averages are only accurate up until half the length that you're using to calculate your moving average in the past. And Can you see here how these three lines turn from dashed lines into dotted lines? So here is the change on the red line. Here's the change on the green line, and here is the change. Where is it? There is the change on the blue line. Okay. That means that as of today's bar, that's over here, today's date, these three lines stopped. These three lines are only calculated up to that point for the red line, that point for the green line, and that point for the blue line. Which means, when was the last cluster of intersections? Well, the last cluster of intersections was over here, which generated a beautifully accurate projection up to this target over here. But now, knowing that projection today is not very useful for us, because it happened 4 or 5 months ago. That is the very big problem with half span and full span moving averages. Now, I see a question from Andy, which I'm going to answer in a moment, and I'd like to mention, Alain pointed out that Millard's work was all about projecting channels forward. It might strike you that projecting these moving average lines is the same thing as projecting channel forward. It is exactly the same thing, and Millard spent a large part of his work investigating different ways of projecting lines forward. You can use linear regression. You can use complex regression, binomial regression. You can use all forms of regression to move these lines back again. But whichever form you use, and believe me, I wouldn't lie to you if I spent months investigating every possible form of regression. Linear regression, binomial regression, there's a thing called squared or something, or regressions I can't even remember the names of. I spent to find the most accurate way of projecting these lines forward. And at the end of investigating all of those processes, can I tell you honestly what I believe? I believe that there is no accurate way of projecting these lines forward. And that is very disappointing news for people who saw their paths paved with gold when they saw this projection over here. But there is no genuine, mathematically sound method for projecting these lines forward. Why is that? Because we only have information that is contained in the price movement that we have. The market is constantly surprising. It moves because of cycles, but despite that, it is constantly surprising. In the small detail, the everyday detail, it is surprising. So we might know the bigger picture, but we don't know the smaller picture. And that's the big challenge of trading markets, and that's what makes it so exciting. But as a result, there is no, I believe, and I'm sure there will be mathematicians out there who will contradict me, but I believe there is no mathematically sound way of projecting those lines forward. And that is why, in answer to Andy's question, he says, you seem to use straight lines to project the triads. Have you tried using the same method that you use to project channels instead? Yes, the channels use a regression method combined with a projection combined with a sine wave projection of where the cycle is expected to move. And I have tried it, and it wasn't very effective. And as a result, I use a straight line projection because I believe that is the most accurate. And I did many tests, and I proved to my satisfaction that it is the most accurate. These moving average lines are not simply moving average lines. They're not simple moving average lines. They are smoothed moving average lines. And they use a particular process for smoothing, which is fairly simple but works very well. And then what happens is Sentient Trader uses the past period of smoothing, if you like, and averages the trend and uses very simple linear regression, and as a result generates a straight line coming out of that. That straight line is initially not very accurate, but it's a safe line, and I'll tell you why. Because before this green channel turns down, the line that it projects is shooting up. Let me clear the whiteboard, because this is actually quite an important point. At the moment, what are we looking for? At the moment, we are looking for, this is the 18-month triad line that I plotted. At the moment, we're looking for a projection down into the next 18-month trough down here. Okay, here is the peak. I think most people are agreed that's the peak. So we're looking for a cluster of intersections, and once we've got that cluster of intersections, we are able to project down to this trough over here. Now, these lines are we're all moving up. Look at the red line. Here it is moving, and then it turns down and starts pointing down. The green line is still moving up. As you can see from the projection, it moves up slightly. The blue line is hardly moving up at all. In fact, it's moving down slightly, as you can see from the projection. Now, by projecting a straight line, the intersections that are found, which are plotted with circles in Sentient Trader, there's one, and there's the other. These intersections plotted by circles occur earlier because this line is still pointing up. You see, this is subtle, but it's still pointing up. By pointing, it occurs earlier. All right, and the more that line points up, if it was pointing up over here, then that intersection would be over here. So by pointing up, it provides you with an earlier intersection and therefore a more conservative projection for the trough. Okay, which is safer, and it doesn't produce totally out of the